folks, Ariel over here at Nyth. I'm going to do a little bit of a tour of my kitchen. If you have followed me or watched my other videos or read blog posts, you probably know that I really like to cook and my kitchen is a very big part of my house. And I've never done a video tour of that or what I have in it. And that's something I get questions about, so I'm going to attempt to answer them. My kitchen is about, it's probably about half the length of my house. My house is a 24-foot long, it's on a 24-foot long trailer, so it's just a bit less than that inside. And my kitchen is about half of that space. Some people do not put a very large kitchen in a tiny house because some people do not cook very much. I personally love to cook, and that was one of the most important things for me to be able to still do in a tiny house when I was thinking about going tiny. So mine is built around that. That may or may not be a priority for you if you're thinking about tiny house design, but if it is, I want to show you a little bit how my setup works, what I actually have, the kinds of things I kept in my kitchen, and tell you a little bit about what you can do in a kitchen. Several people have asked me about doing cooking videos. It's something I'm experimenting with, trying to figure out if I can do. It's a little bit hard for me because for just a bit of my cooking background, I've been cooking since I was very young. My mother has pictures of me baking bread when I was about 7 and had to stand on a stool to even reach the countertop. When we're talking making bread, my family cooked most things from scratch, so that involved grinding whole grains in a grain mill and doing everything from scratch from there on up, including at times using honey as a sweetener that was from the beehives in our backyard and so on. So I did learn how to do some of this stuff from scratch. I'm also the oldest. I've got 6 younger siblings. My mother had a lot of issues with nausea with every pregnancy, which meant that thinking about food was difficult for her during those times. So that kind of forced me to learn to cook. I did a lot of the cooking for my family as I was growing up, for all eventually 9 people. And so I have a lot of practice. So my problem with doing cooking videos is people say, oh, do you share recipes? I am happy to share recipes. Anything I do is not a secret, except that I don't use recipes very much for very many things. I do use a recipe if I'm going to make a meringue or something like that, where there are a couple things you can cook that have very precise measurements and that will not turn out if you do not precisely measure them. I do not cook many of those kinds of things. I cook a lot of soups, stews, casseroles, salads, sauces, gravies. All of these things do not get hurt by having random changes to the recipe, so I don't use one. So if you watch me cooking, you're going to see me dump some of this and pour some of that and taste it and then add some of this and then say, oh, that's in the fridge too and probably should be used up, and throw that in. And then you're going to ask for a recipe and I'm going to say, I don't have one. So we'll see if I can work on cooking videos. But in the meantime, my cooking setup. This is, you should be able to see most of the kitchen. The main appliances are, I do have a 4-burner propane stove. There is also an oven, which probably does not show up in the video. It's a propane oven. It does have enough, it's about 20 inches wide. This is a brown, I think Brown Stoveworks propane range. You can find them under Brown Stoveworks. Google that. I'm not sure if it's brownstoveworks.com or not. But the oven is big enough that I can put a roast pan with a 20-pound turkey in there. That is something I'll do, or I do. I will show you my roast pan in a little bit. You can bake cookies, can do whatever in there. The 4 burners work pretty well. I do have some large pots and pans, for instance, my one big cast iron skillet. The 4 burners are close enough together because of the size that I could not put 4 pans this size on there all at once. The burners are all the same size, unlike a lot of electric stoves, but I would have to kind of stagger them. A big pot here, and small pots on either side if I was going to be using all 4 burners. There is a range hood over this. There's a light. There is a fan. You can probably hear that kick on. Then my other big thing is I have a double sink, which I'll show you in more detail when I turn the camera around, but I do have 2 full sinks that is something I use all the time because I end up stacking dirty dishes in one while I'm cooking or prepping something, washing veggies or my hands or whatever in the other one, then washing dishes in the little one that are stacked in the big one, so on. I'm just really glad I put in a double sink. A lot of people may think that's a waste of space, and depending on what you do, how much you cook, and how you cook, it may very well be. For me, it's amazing. I love it. My sink came from IKEA. It's 2 basins. One is bigger, one is smaller, and it's got a built-in drain board, which is fabulous because I don't get water from drying dishes all over my butcher-bought countertops. The last big thing, appliance-wise, is the refrigerator, which is directly under the camera there. So I'll have to show you that when I turn around as well. There's a fridge and a freezer. It's an Avanti model. It does a really great job of holding enough stuff but not taking up too much space for my particular setup. Now, as far as things that I kept in my kitchen, some people definitely are going to say the point of a tiny house is to be minimalist. That may be your point to a tiny house. It was not necessarily mine. You've probably heard me say in other videos that I'm somewhere between a minimalist because I don't like having a lot of stuff I don't use around, and a prepper because I like having everything that I actually want to use or do use or will need to use around. So as far as how did I reduce my kitchen things to fit in a tiny house, for the most part, I did not. Actually, when I was still living in my last condo and trying to figure out moving into a tiny house, that was the first thing I did. I went through my whole kitchen, took out everything out of all of the cupboards, put them on a stack on the dining room table, and thought, okay, these things I do not want to have to live without. Could I? Probably yes. I can cook one-pot meals. I backpack a lot. I can cook a great meal for several people in a little tiny pot, but I don't want to have to do that. So these are the things I would like to keep for sure. Can I fit these into a tiny house? So my house was built with that in mind. As I go around here, let me see, what can you see in the video right now? This open shelf up here has pots and pans. I've got a full set of Cuisinart, I think it's called the Multi-Clad Pro. I've got everything from stock pots to little skillets and small pots. They're a really nice set of cookware. They're all stainless steel. They're not nonstick, no nasty chemicals. There is a copper core that's not just on the bottom, comes partway up the side. If you cook a lot, you'll realize that does a lot to conduct heat nice and evenly and not burn things as fast. So I love that. I kept the whole set. I've also got a stack of various mixing bowls. I like old things when they're useful. I've got an old antique, I think, because it was my grandmother's little strainer right there. That's the top shelf. I've got my knives, mostly steak knives, and then several little paring knives, and a chef's knife. This end is the things I use all of the time. The paring knives, there's several different styles. These are made by Rada Cutlery. You can find these on Amazon. It's only $10, $11, $12, $15 for a set of these, depending which set you pick. If you cook a lot, these are fabulous. They last forever. They can be sharpened easily. They keep an edge very well. The blades are slightly flexible, which is great if you do a lot of peeling veggies and such. They're just terrific. I really like them. My Cutco chef's knife is my main knife for everything else. Everyone probably has their own personal knife preferences. Those are mine. The steak knives gets used every now and then, and the bread knife once in a blue moon. But that's my knife set. It is really nice to have a knife magnet. Keeps them up, out of the way, where they're handy to reach, easy to see, and where you're not going to reach in a drawer and grab a knife by the blade and accidentally cut your finger open. I also have just my random little kitchen things pot. This I got from a friend when she moved out of town because I thought it was really cute. The little pot that is, or the crock. And I have lots of stuff in there, if you can see. I have everything from wire whisks to pie servers to rubber spatulas. Rubbermaid makes, in my opinion, the best, most awesome rubber spatula out there. Various ladles, including this antique, which I found at a antique store. It's got all the little cup and ounce markings on the sides. I've got an old metal potato masher because I think the new plasticky ones suck. I've got ice cream scoops. This is probably an antique. It was actually given out as one of those loyal customer gifts or something by my grandfather's gas business. And somehow I inherited that into my stuff. Little strainers, just your regular bamboo spatulas, which I use all the time, various servers. Anyway, I use everything in there on a pretty regular basis. If I'm just going to go through everything, I've got one of these little spoon holders. When I'm stirring, cooking, tasting things, it's handy to just be able to put spoons and such in there so that it catches all drips and they're not soaking into my countertops. The cupboard's right by the wood stove, which you can see and probably hear crackling. I'm just going to go through what I have in each of my drawers. Let's see about doing this one-handed. This drawer, as you can see, is things like bags, saran wrap, foil, etc. It's a nice skinny little drawer, works well for that. This drawer is all of my silverware. Again, I did not keep one spoon and one fork. I have guests over for dinner on a fairly regular basis. I didn't even count, but there's probably 20 of each of those spoons, forks, and knives. And then I've got all my other odds and ends like basters, tea strainers, can openers, egg slicers, little tiny scoops, cork opener, vegetable peelers, all of that fits nicely in that drawer. And there's just a random, divider that doesn't quite fit the drawer perfectly, but it's what I already had when I moved in here. Come down to the next drawer. This is kind of dry goods storage. I don't use a lot of flour because it doesn't sit well with me, but this has things like rice, coconut, sugars, grains, quinoa, so on. That's just all fits nicely in that big drawer. And down to the very bottom drawer, more of those kinds of things. Nuts, dried fruits, and so on. So that's actually part of my pantry. Come back to this big cupboard door. This cupboard does not always stay organized. There's probably a better way to do the shelf in here. But I've got pie plates. Again, I rarely have one of anything. I believe there is 5 pie plates in that stack. I've got a bigger cake pan. I've got various leftover containers. I do generally prefer to use glass and not plastic when possible, though most of them have plastic lids. I've got cookie cooling racks. I've got cookie sheets on the very bottom. I have 3 bread loaf pans, and I think I've got 4 of those 9x13 glass pans, which I use for all kinds of things. So that's all in that cupboard. While I'm down here, there you can see the oven, which you couldn't see, I don't think, from where the camera was earlier. And it's pretty dark inside. This one does not have a light for me to turn on. It does have a window, which is nice, but you can kind of see what it looks like inside there. So I come on over here. The next storage drawer is kind of my odds and ends. Measuring cups, random corks, funnels, ice cube or molding trays, a beautiful wood rolling pin, which really should live somewhere outside of this drawer. It was a gift from a friend. It would probably roll things just as well if it wasn't beautiful, but I think it's gorgeous handmade wood. Under here, this is mostly the trash cupboard. There we go, trash can, and then extra trash bags, a little dustpan, a brush on the side, etc. Nothing very interesting there. This top drawer used to be a drawer until the double sink was installed. And the double sink, as you can see where it comes over there, ran into this drawer space. So the drawer was removed. This is just screwed tight. Still looks like it matches everything else, but is not actually a drawer right there any longer. Next one down holds random plastic containers, though I don't prefer to use them for leftovers. If I'm taking food to other houses or giving food away, they are what I use because I don't want to lose my glass containers. And the very bottom drawer is mostly kitchen linen type things. Dish towels, hot pads, dish rags, a few other things like my mandolin slicer, which is fabulous as long as you don't cut your fingers wide open on it. That's kind of that big drawer, just some bulky odd things that don't fit anywhere else. Again, this just looks like it's a drawer. You can see the sink is right there, so obviously there is no drawer right there. That's bolted tight. And under here is just random storage for, I guess this is more of my chemical area. And my chemicals usually consist of peroxide, vinegar, borax, soap nuts, things like that. That's all kind of piled around in there. Mostly cleaning things. This is my amazing drain board that's built in. Like I mentioned, I've got a dish rack on it, but as you can see, anything that drips off of there is going to go straight in the sink and not into the countertop. Now, if I go up here, this is above the sink. I keep, first, that glass water jug has just drinking water in so that you don't have to get it out of the faucet. The whole top shelf there is kombucha jars and some of the bulkier things like oats, salt, yeast, so on. Those are all stored in those jars up top. Pretty well out of the light. I guess another appliance I didn't mention earlier that I kept is a KitchenAid mixer. That's a very old one. It was my parents' before I was born. They bought a new one and my mom gave me my her old one. Still works great, and there are some things that I use it for, whether it's mixing a stiff cookie dough, which sure beats beating it by hand, or putting the shredder attachment on it. Oh, that's one of the other things that was down in this very bottom drawer, kind of under the fabrics, because I don't use it very often. But if you need to shred a whole lot of something finely and evenly, the shredder attachment on there is pretty amazing. And then I've got some other bowls, plates, dessert plates, so on. And hiding back under there is my little bag drying rack. Just kind of a bunch of little spokes so you can easily hang up little Ziploc baggies and dry them. This is a shelf I really wish I had a door on, just because it doesn't look very tidy. But it has some bulky, big, important things. The very top dark lump there you can barely see is my giant roast pan. Also an antique. Came either from my mother or grandmother. I honestly don't remember which, but I think they got it from a garage sale or something else. It's one of the really old ones and roasts things amazingly well. Underneath there, behind the recipe box, I've got a steam bath canner, which I use, and just other bulky things. And obviously in the front is the alcohol collection. I don't drink a whole lot, but there are some recipes that use alcohol, and every now and then when friends are over, I do have a drink. Here you can see the fridge and freezer. I had actually just cleaned it out and defrosted, so it's going to be far more empty than normal. But there's a little freezer compartment and the refrigerator. I do normally try to keep both these things pretty full because heating or cooling empty airspace is far less efficient than actual objects. So then I've got this little tiny inset shelf with glassware, mugs, random bottles and jars. This is my newest, coolest gift from my sister-in-law. This is a coffee mug, turn it so you can see it there, but built to look like a Canon camera lens, which is pretty neat since I like photography. And then we come on around to the pantry door. This is also a little bit dark. As you can see, I've got spices on the door itself. Several spice racks I just hung on the door. It's pretty great way to easily access them because you can only stack them just barely too deep, as you can see. So it's pretty easy to see what you've got everywhere. And then my pantry honestly is not that organized looking, but the top is oils and vinegars and honeys and so on. Chocolate, the most important thing there in the front. Coconut milk, canned foods. On down, we've got, you know, I guess the easiest things to see there are some more vinegar, gelatin, so on. Just, you know, a lot of this is not organized, and the bulkiest things kind of down below here. We've got some pastas. That is really dark. Anyway, that's my pantry. It's pretty deep, part of what's making that so dark, and does allow me to store a good bit of food. If you locked me in my tiny house, I would be able to eat for several months without dying of starvation. Might just run out of variety. This little cupboard over in my loft, if I can hop up on the couch, which is how I reach it, you can see I've got empty jars up top right now. And if I open this, I've got some empty jars and some home canned goods in there. Now that this is March, at the end of a fall, those jars will pretty much all be full, and that will be all full of food. At this time of year, I've emptied a lot of them and just stacked the empty jars back in there. As you could just see, I do have home canned things. People ask, can you can in a tiny house? Yes, absolutely. As I stated earlier, I could not fit like 4 giant pots on these burners all at once because they're too close together. But I do have a canner, I do can things, I have a big garden when there's not 10 feet of snow outside, growing the things that can handle cold climates as much as possible, and I do pickle things, can things. I have, pick that up and show you. I have a sauerkraut fermenting crock. I do make my own sauerkraut. I do make kombucha. You probably saw those jars up on the top shelf. Those are all things that can be done in a tiny house. I've also dehydrated food, which I mostly use for hiking or backpacking because of its lightweightness. I have frozen, though I have a somewhat limited amount of freezer space, some veggies and such. I do have access to being able to store a chest freezer at a neighbor's house. I do a lot of cooking for him. He lets me store some frozen stuff there, so I can overflow some bulk freezer things to there, which is helpful when I want to buy whole turkeys when they go on sale after Thanksgiving. Buy one, get one free, and I want to buy 10 so I can roast a turkey every month for the next year until Thanksgiving rolls around again. So some of those things are not in the little freezer you saw, but are things that I do incorporate into my cooking. I just wouldn't be able to buy a couple of those in bulk if I didn't have access to storing a bigger freezer in another place. But that's generally the layout of my kitchen. Hopefully that kind of showed you how everything's laid out, where everything is, what I have, and gives you a little bit of an idea of what works for me. I find it pretty efficient. If you're cooking and there's a second person in the house, this space is a little bit narrow, and so it's a little bit hard for 2 people to get past each other. But as long as it's just one, it's a very efficient space. Because I can stand right at the stove and I can reach the sink and I can reach the counter and I can grab things out of the pantry, and it's just very easy to cook. It's very efficient. I like to cook, and so that's one of the things I probably would say I do for fun. Anyway, if you got any other questions about my kitchen setup, let me know, and like, follow, subscribe. Talk to you folks later.